Hi, it's time again for the SMC Journal Show. I'm Scott Moore, your host. Thanks for joining me. This is the show that's all about IT, software engineering, software development, testing, tuning, AI security, whatever it is, we've got you covered. And today's show, we're going to be talking about databases. I've been working with databases in IT for almost 3 decades now, and boy, has the landscape around that changed. And I think everybody who works in IT, you've got to acknowledge that there is more data being processed by databases than we have ever seen. And the larger and larger amounts are just mind numbing. AI brings a lot of that to the table and the mass amounts of data that it creates itself. If you had never heard of the database called ClickHouse, it's an open source database. Man, it sort of seems like that's a performance engineer's perfect database, especially when you're talking about dealing with real time analytics and heavy read only databases and making it perform really well. Performance engineers are going to love this show today. So, we're going to talk to the CEO of Altinity, a service provider and support provider, and a main contributor to the ClickHouse database project on today's show. Let's get right into it with Robert Hodges. Hi, Robert. Welcome to the SMC Journal Show. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
Well, the first question I want to ask you is tell me a little bit about you and about your company because this is a new area of research for me.
Sure, I'd be delighted to. So let me start with the company. We are a platform and support provider for a very popular open source database called ClickHouse, which has taken the world by storm. It offers real-time performance. It gets your queries back to your users in a second or less. It's very economical to run, and it's really been a tremendous, actually a really big influence on the direction of analytics. That fits right in with me because I've been working on databases in one form or another since 1983. I started with pre-relational databases. I got a job at Sybase in the early 90s. I was there when we sold the code base to Microsoft, went on to Oracle, building applications, experience with Hadoop, and then finally landed on analytic databases about 6 years ago. So it's been the main thing I've done in my career, and being able to do it on ClickHouse is just really fun.
Wow, when you say Sybase, that's kicking off some brain cells that have not been kicked off in a long time. Back in the day when I first started doing testing, I remember Sybase was one of those monitors that LoadRunner had in it when we were doing performance testing, but very few people had that
Absolutely.
database.
You didn't work in Lower Wall Street, it seems,
Yeah, that's
because
right.
we were 20 out of 20, and we took Wall Street by storm. We were 20 out of 20 in the top trading firms in Lower Wall Street, and in fact, some of our financial customers are still running Sybase, but trying to migrate off it.
That's a testimonial. That's great. So I had not heard of ClickHouse DB until I started talking to Josh Lee, who is with you now, and I've known Josh for a couple of years now. And I started looking into this, and it's a very interesting database. And I would like for you to tell our audience about what ClickHouse actually is and how Altinity works with ClickHouse and how all this works because I understand that it's not your typical like row based, it's a column based database and I wanted to know, like, why is that so important around the performance for these analytics?
Sure, I'd be glad to. In fact, and you're exactly right. The thing that is really the first thing you notice about ClickHouse is it stores data in columns instead of rows. The other thing that it does, and we'll get to this in a second, is extremely efficient at searching those columns. And for example, being able to do it across many CPU cores, across many machines on the network. But coming back to columns, so the difference between a row-based database and a column-based database is if you have things like invoice records, the rows in an invoice, if you put them in MySQL, which is a row-based database, all of the data for each row goes in a single place in storage. So what that means is if you want to read one row or you want to change one row, it's an ideal way to set things up because you can just go there in one read, it's all there. However, if you're trying to read just one column out of those invoice records, and maybe you have like a billion of them loaded in the database, in MySQL, it's going to make you read every single row. So you're going to read everything and not just the data you want. Column databases fix that. What they do is they take the columns of those invoice records and they put them in separate files. And you can, when you're reading the data, you only have to open one set of files or, for however many columns you have, and that's all you touch and that's all you read. And as a result, they can scan data extremely fast because right off the bat, they're cutting a bunch of it out. So that's the basic difference, but there's more to it. One of the things that storing columns or data in columns does is it makes it compress very well because it's an array of data that's of the same type and often arranged in patterns, like, say, if it's a timestamp for records, where it's gently ascending in value over time. And so as a result, if your data is sorted that way, when you compress it, you get these miraculous compression rates. And sometimes, in some cases, data will compress to 99% of its former value.
Hmm.
So that's another reason why ClickHouse is outstandingly good, because when you ask a question, you read less data in the first place because you only look at the columns that are in the query. And then the columns themselves occupy much smaller space on disk, so you do less I/O. For this reason, we can often do operations that require scanning entire table much faster, like hundreds of times faster than something like MySQL. The final thing is ClickHouse is very good at taking those scans and just breaking them up into pieces and farming them out into as many processors, as many machines on the network as it has available. And as a result, this is what gets you these query results that sometimes can be 1,000 times faster than MySQL.
This is, I think about this, it's a performance engineer's dream because it seems like this was designed from the ground up to be as scalable as performant as possible. So
That
I'm already loving what I'm hearing.
That's absolutely right, and I think a lot of the credit for that goes to Alexei Milividov, who is the original author or the designer of ClickHouse and is still the lead committer on the project. Um, they originally developed ClickHouse at a company called Yandex, which had a product called Metrica. It's a bit like Google Analytics, and they were using MySQL to store the data and then do those slice and dice queries. And ClickHouse arose because in trying to do those queries, they just quickly overwhelmed MySQL. And so Alexei wrote a little report writer, which had sort of the kernel of the ideas of ClickHouse, solved this problem of being able to do slice and dice queries, and then they just built from there. And ended up solving a bunch of other problems like network analysis, funnel analysis, and e-commerce websites, so on and so forth.
Interesting, very interesting. So, if ClickHouse is fast, what are some of the problems that your customers are experiencing, and how does your company kind of add value to this and push it even further?
That's a great question. So it's an incredibly powerful tool, but like powerful tools, they are best used in expert hands. Otherwise, you can really hurt yourself. And I mean, literally, so one of the things that ClickHouse does is you can think of it as being built like a race car. Every design decision in at some level comes down to performance in ClickHouse. Do we want consistent data or do we want it to be fast? Well, you know what? I think we're going to go for fast. Do we want to be able to have data always fully recoverable, or do we want to be fast? Well, I think we're going to choose fast. So as a result, when you use this database, it's really important to make good choices about how you lay data out. If it's not laid out well, it can be actually very slow. It's because you don't get the full value of compression, or you have access patterns that just violate the core assumptions. The other thing is that ClickHouse will use gobble up as more memory, as much memory and resources as it can find. And if your queries are not well structured, they may end up just running out of memory because they're basically programmed to use as much as they can. And so, because of problems like that, it's really important if you're starting out with ClickHouse to have somebody who really knows it. And we don't just know ClickHouse; we know what's going up on inside the project. There's thousands of PRs that hit this project every year. We keep track of them, help people decide when things are stable, what to use, how to solve problems, how to fix broken systems. And then beyond that, we run ClickHouse for them. ClickHouse systems are often quite big. They might have a couple dozen nodes in them or more. We have customers that run hundreds of nodes. We can operate those for our customers and basically take away the heavy lifting of maintaining this complex, difficult to, sort of complex system that requires huge level of automation, a lot of focus to run well. So that's the problem that we solve for our users.
Again, this parallels performance engineering 101. I mean, speed for the sake of speed can kill. You don't put a
Yeah.
kid in a Lamborghini that can go 200 miles an hour and just say, go out,
Yep.
go play in the yard. You can't do that. And so
Right.
you have to have that level of control, and with that comes responsibility. Now, I could see this being really a good solution for, let's say you were starting a new observability company, and you're putting it out there on SaaS, and everybody's jumping into it. Financial ad agencies, you need a lot of metrics and you need it fast. But I see a huge problem that we have today, which is how fast we need data and more of it. It's exponential growth. How are
Right.
you dealing with that issue?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think as we look at ClickHouse today, this is one of two fundamental problems that people are facing. It's just the growth of data. And you mentioned observability, which I think is exhibit A for the size of data that some of our customers are dealing with. So we have customers now that are putting in 2 petabytes of data a day into an observability system that's only tracking a fraction of the observability data in their systems. Those 2 petabytes a day, that's bigger than almost all the systems we helped manage when I started working at Altinity.
I can
And this
imagine.
is, so this is truly exponential growth. We're dealing with systems that have grown, 1,000-fold over the last 5 to 6 years. So, and what is it that this actually does practically? Well, a number of things. One, it's costly. It's storage costs money, and particularly if you're using SSDs or some form of rotating rust, with replication, so you have multi copies of the data, it gets really really expensive. As these systems grow, then the price of storage begins to dominate. Other things, though, as these systems get big, they're hard to manage. There's stress on them. You have to balance the resources that are used to read data in with the resources that are used for selects. If you don't get that right, your system won't just be slow; it will crash,
Hmm.
and you may have to deal with data corruption issues. So this growth in data is a huge problem for users, and it's also dovetailing with another problem, which is it's more people than just real-time systems, like people doing real-time dashboards that want to see this data. You have AI, you have data science, you have batch reporting. They want to see this same data, and so keeping it locked inside of a data warehouse is now becoming a major problem because it forces people to keep multiple copies of data that's already large to begin with.
You mentioned AI, and we are seeing now we got this exponential growth, but we've also got exponential change going on. That area of AI, people who do nothing but keep up with AI can't keep up with all the changes that are happening almost on a daily basis. So this area of analytics is changing as well. And so how are you going to keep up with this? And do we even can we even say what we know this is going to look like in 36 months from now?
I think the answer, I can't speak for everyone, but the answer for me on AI to that question is no. I can't see what AI is actually going to look like and how it's going to use data. But there are certain patterns which are becoming very, very clear. One, AI uses the same source data that we're using for real-time analytics. So for example, if you have observability systems and you're trying to detect problems autonomously, that's the same data. You'll train your AI on that data, and at the same time, you'll have that same data being used for real-time dashboards that you use to go find, to alert you and then diagnose what's wrong. So being able to share data is critical, and that means that we need to be able to read and write the same data formats that AI is using, and we need to store it in the same location that they're using. Second thing, AI. You mentioned observability. AI generates a flood of data. People talk about how, how many resources we use to build these AI systems. Like we are running systems that are so large that people like Microsoft are now going to recommission nuclear plants to supply power for them. Just think how much
Crazy.
analytic data is being thrown off by those systems and needs to be observed. So that's the second thing that we need to do. The third thing is AI as it develops is in order to keep models up to date, AI also needs to reach back into databases sometimes to get the most current data so that it can make decisions that take into account data that became available after the model was trained. So that's the third place where we see the intersection between the data we manage and the AI processes that are consuming it. So for us, what we're focused on is trying to solve those problems. AI will figure itself out, but if we can share data with it, if we can monitor it, and if we can give AI ways to reach in and grab the data when they need it, we'll let the AI engineers figure it out. They will develop the solution. If they find additional things they need, we will provide them. In the meantime, that's our focus.
This is going to be a wild ride, I believe, over the next couple of years, and I can't make any prognostications either.
Yeah.
So it's going to be wild. One of the questions I always like to ask a company when we're featuring a product or a service, I don't like to talk in terms of competitive. Like I don't want
Mm,
to ask you like what makes you better than a competitor out there. I always like to ask the question is what makes you different, because I think that's
yeah.
what customers want to know. If you're focused on what your customers are asking for and you're building the product that they want, you won't have to worry about competition. It's just a personal thing with me. So, how would you say that you differentiate yourself in the market between all the other players that are doing something similar to you?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question. I think there's some practical things that we have done which were just really strong, really good decisions that helped us build the business. And then there's how we help customers build for the future. So turning to that first question of what we've done in the past, one, we're all in on open source. So we believe that the building blocks of of systems today should be open and freely accessible to anybody. We build a business that supports and runs those, and we're profitable. So this is something that's good for customers, but by providing something they need, it's also good for us. The second thing is we're deep on support. These systems, as we've mentioned, are are very complex. We have the best ClickHouse engineers on the planet, and they don't just sort of apply patches and reboot. They go to the heart of your problem. Why are you having this problem? What can you really do to solve it in your applications? Third thing is we let people run anywhere. This is something we picked up on very early. Uh, ClickHouse will literally run on phones if you need it, but the point is we let customers make the decision about where they need to run these analytics, and and then we either give them support to help them do it if they want to run it themselves. We can run it in entirely our own cloud if they want it turnkey, or we can manage it in their cloud if they want it to be turnkey, but they want to control the data. So those are three practical things that we do, which are, I think, significant differentiators beyond the fact that we're on the fastest database on the planet. Looking forward, the thing that we are doing, which differentiates us from many of our competitors, is we are building for an age where 95% of the source data that people are analyzing is no longer in databases. And I think we've talked about AI, we've talked about the data set sizes. What we are in the middle of a transition where data now has exceeded the bounds of database services, including very capable ones like Snowflake, and is now migrating into data lakes organized using open table formats like Iceberg. This is where the data is going to live, and it changes the meaning of what is a database, and also forces us to make decisions about what data should go in the data lake and be shared with everybody, and what data needs to be inside databases like ClickHouse to make them fast, to make them able to handle changes, to make them able to help diagnose problems or sort of find interesting data at very low cost, and then go dig into the source data, which may be harder to get to or slower to read. That's the thing that we're building for right now.
I think that's amazing, and congratulations on having a profitable business built on top of open source. I think that's great too. I wanted to find, you guys are not just a user of ClickHouse. You're a major contributor. You're not just supporting it. You actually contribute to the project as well. So, how do you balance that? And what would you say from what's being contributed right now? And you answered a little bit about this in the broader vision of what's coming, but what do you see as the next thing that we should see right down the road that's going to change as people are contributing to this project?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up because I think if you're in open source, you do have this make this commitment to give back. Part of what, to be frank, I mean, we like open source. We feel very, very strongly about it that it's the right thing to do, but it's also great marketing. So it's not like there's a conflict between these two things. So I think in the past we've always sought to have to make as many contributions, any problem that we solved, we pushed it into open source so it remains solved for our customers, no matter what happens to us. But looking forward, where we are moving to is this new architecture for that integrates real-time analytics with data lakes. We've developed that as something called Project Antalya, and we're going to be releasing that shortly. This will be fully open source. And this is not just ClickHouse, but actually other things like caching, routing, other types of services which are necessary to build these new data warehouses that can deal with enormous amounts of data, share it with AI and data science, and basically allow you to build systems that will still be operating a decade from now. That's going to be pushed into open source. We anticipate that this is going to be really popular. It will help our users, and we hope and are pretty confident it's also going to help us build a great business.
That's
So that's
that's
that's how
great.
we're contributing back.
That's awesome. So that we'll definitely make sure that we share that with our audience and where they can go and find that out. Is there any parting words that you'd like to share with us, or any place you'd like for people to go to check out more about ClickHouse and Altinity?
Yeah, come to our website. You can contact us. You can read about the work that we're doing. It will give you pointers to the open source projects. If you're just there to find out and go use them yourself and passing through, great. If you need more help, we're there to help. The other thing I would say is join our Slack. We have it's growing rapidly. It's the place where if you want to come talk about these problems that you and I have been discussing, that's the best place to find us. And you can just come in, tag me by name. Pretty good chance I'll answer. So
That's pretty cool, I got to say. This has been a great discussion. I've enjoyed this. I've learned a lot. We'll be sharing with this. Appreciate you being on the show today, and you're welcome back anytime.
thank you so much, Scott. It's been a pleasure.
If you are working with AI on the back end, having to process all of this data that's coming out these days, you've got to be excited right now, because this is the time where you're seeing all of these advancements because of the necessity to process all of this data. So I'd like to know, are you dealing with that mass amount of data? Has AI generated so much more data for what you're working with that it's actually causing you bottlenecks that you had never discovered before or you've never encountered before? I'd like to know. I'd love your feedback on this show as well. You can reach me on all major platforms, on the social platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter, X, Instagram, whatever they're calling it, all whatever the cool kids are doing. I'm there. I'm on TikTok and all that stuff. Or you can give me feedback at my email address at heyscott@smcjournal.com. Would love to hear from you. And I haven't asked you yet, but I'm going to now. If you like this show and you like this content, it would be great if you could subscribe to the channel. We're growing that channel every day. You can go to that QR code or that URL and give me some feedback. Am I doing a good job? Am I giving you the kind of content that you want? That's what I live for. I live to give you the kind of content that you want to see. But yeah, it would be great if you could let me know that, and we'll keep creating more shows. So until the next SMC Journal show, this is Scott Moore thanking you once again for watching. We'll see you later. Bye bye.